Good evening. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Rhinebeck Central School District Board of Education. It is Tuesday, December 12th, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. May I have a motion for approval of our last meeting's minutes?
So moved.
Second. Any corrections, amendments? All those in favor? It's unanimous. That motion passes. We have time for public comment, but it seems we have no public in attendance. We can move on to reports and discussions. The 2018-19 budget development update, rollover budget.
Tom is going to start right here.
Okay, at your desk tonight, or at your table tonight, we gave you the printouts that were sent to you last evening, so we have that. We will get them all stamped in at the next board meeting in January. Then the first draft, we will give you your book. So hold on to those. I'll bring a free hole punch with me so that we can hole punch that. I forgot about hole punching it this evening. Sorry about that. So the first thing I want to go over is the tax levy limit. All right, last year we pierced the cap, and so we're starting from a higher place of $27,912,000. I did get the tax base growth factor already. It's 0.57, so it's a little less than average, but it's still an increase. There's a few school districts in this county that have gotten very little over the whole life of the tax cap, which is the sixth year now, maybe?
And that's new building and
New buildings and additions. That does not call for renovations.
Okay.
Renovations do not get put into that number. They get added to our tax base, but they don't get added to the tax base growth factor. The idea of new growth is adding new kids to the school district, on average. So that's at 0.57%. We subtract out the payments in lieu of taxes. This is for the Baptist home. Later on, we add it back in. We subtract out our capital exemptions. That's at $1,013,000. Right now, the latest CPI figure is 2.05%. I've been told that it's going to start to head down a little bit. So I decided, I thought 1.8% was prudent. The figure comes out about January 15th. So sometimes it comes out a little bit earlier than that, but typically that's right around the 15th. So even with the first draft, we won't have a true number there. But I will get the December number, so we'll see an indication of a trend at least for those who start their, I think it's, start their fiscal year in May, get their 2 week villages or something like that. We'll get their number, actually it would have been around the 15th of this month. They'll get that number. We can see if it is trending down, trending up, staying even. Maybe be able to make it from there. But I think 1.8 is prudent at this point. A 0.2% increase is going to be about additional $57,000. So if we get up to 2%, that will add $57,000 to the tax levy. Payments in lieu of taxes, you add that back in. Pilots net out any changes. So the tax levy limit, $27,543,000. Change over, that number comes forward. We add the capital local exclusions. I'm using last year's number. This number changes. Not drastically this year. Next year that number will go down because we'll be retiring one of the long-term debts. So there'll be less on the debt service time side, but also less on the building aid side. So it should work itself out. It will reduce the tax levy next year, but at the same time we're reducing our overall budget because it's less debt we're paying next year. So based on that information, this is just, preliminary, looking at an additional $645,000 being added to the tax levy. So that's
To stay within the cap.
To stay within the cap. Okay. So that's where we are currently on with the tax levy limit. Any questions about that? I mean, we'll have to wait and see how the rest of it plays out, but unfortunately at this moment, until we get state aid runs, I can't adjust the local capital exclusion, and of course we don't have a final figure for the CPI. If we go to the next two-page document, and that's the revenue side, don't get too much in the taxes or anything of that nature. We'll talk of that once we get through the expenditures. It does show a tax levy increase of 5.43%, but I haven't really changed too much. I'll go through with things that I'm currently recommending to change, and that can be changed as we go further on. So, you know, as far as the real property taxes, they are what they are. You see the STAR tax relief reimbursement, you see it all zeros. It's a part of your tax levy. It's a part that will be taken out later. It's a levy, and this will reduce that levy, the STAR reimbursement. Non-resident tuition, we're doing nice right now. We have 3 students in the school. Some 2 just came in recently, so that's nice to see that there will be monies this year. Interest and earnings getting a little bit better. I may forecast that a little bit higher. I'll sit down with Christine Natoli, take a look at our investments. The Fed's maybe raising the interest rates, so that will help the school district too, because that is all new money, and it's protected from the tax cap. So any new money and interest is new money to the district. Now, real rental of real properties, that's it may lower that a little bit. The auditorium isn't used as much by outside agencies as in the past. A couple
paying outside.
Yeah, paying outside. A couple of them think it's too high, and they found other places. Insurance recoveries, that's usually a pretty good thing. Refund from BOCES aided services. Those are monies that we receive from BOCES. They're not allowed to keep a fund balance. All right, they have to return their monies back to the school districts. And we will get a check from them based on last year for monies they have left over, and they go through a whole process of determining you had so many kids in the Center for Technology or for Technical Institute, and there's this much money left over. You are 5% of this, so you're going to get 5% of what's left over. They do that with everything, special ed programs, they look at everything. They give any money that's not spent back to the school district. Refund of prior year's expenses, we get refunds of different various things, insurance rebates, things of that nature, other unclassified revenues, a lot of little minor things. State aid at this moment, if you look at it, I have not touched it at all. Got reports that the New York State has, looking to next year's budget, has a $4 billion deficit. See where it goes. I saw the Regents' proposal today, though it doesn't break it down by school district, but they're asking for $1.6 billion extra. So, see where it all plays out. That's a nice big political game that, as you know, we don't have a great influence on it, but we have to pay close attention to it. If we go back onto the second page, we have Medicaid reimbursements. It's actually looking pretty good. We may trend that up a little bit with Christine doing this work with an outside company. We're getting better returns, but we haven't really gotten a trend yet to really decide whether or not that's, how much money we actually could generate additional. This is when we provide speech therapy, counseling to our own students. They consider that the school is a medical facility to be able to give these types of things. So we get a reimbursement based on, for our Medicaid eligible students, we get reimbursement when they have a session with their therapist in different ways. And our OT and PT, outside agencies too, that contribute to that. The next part is interfund transfers, which really gets to our fund balances. The interfund transfer to special aid, that is money we get back from the federal government for doing the federal projects. A percentage of that we get for administrative services, which are then transferred to the school general fund. Our office provides a lot of the work. It's special aid, or special ed offices. This is kind of just an administrative thing that we can recoup from them. Not a lot of money, but it's better than nothing. The next line is transfer for debt service. This is our debt service monies were accumulated during our last capital project. During our last capital project, we got about $1 million worth of interest over the years. We won't even come close to that type of number. Interest rates back then were really, really good. We had like $24 million to invest to begin with. So, and it took a couple of years to pay that all out. So we were getting some nice returns. This project is half of that, and instead of interest rates being 4 or 5%, we're at this time we get a little over 1 right now. So nowhere near as much money as through the last one I would anticipate. So we're slowly been paying down that $1 million to offset the taxes, and we're at the point now that we're getting to about $300,000 and have to start weeding ourselves off of that. If we keep doing it $100,000, it can run out in 3 years. And what do you do in 3 years when you got $100,000 worth of revenues that are gone? So that would automatically create. So slowly taking ourselves off of that one. Same thing goes with our fund balance. Slowly bringing that down. That's one of the things also Steve Banger talked about in the audit committee, that we got to start weaning ourselves off of the use of fund balance. And it's a good practice, and this will help try to build our fund balance back up to levels. The next one I've kept the same, and that's our workers' comp. I think it had about $175,000 in that account. That was set up initially because we had an unfunded liability at our self-insured workers' comp that was run by Dutchess County. It was unfunded.
Dutchess County or Dutchess BOCES?
Dutchess BOCES, but Dutchess County schools don't really matter. All Dutchess County schools except Wappingers are in the self-insurance plan. And so we set aside, I believe at the time, I think it was $175,000. And so we started to draw down on that, but this year when all the reports came out, that unfunded liability is gone. So workers' comp has really reversed itself. They went from a $10 million unfunded liability, which we were only 3% of this, so it was like $300,000. And about 3 years later, we're up to a positive. We've been very lucky overall as an entire workers' comp that there's been really no major injuries over the past few years. And a lot of the old cases have been settled and got behind us, and those reserves were taken off, and those monies added back to our fund, to the workers' comp fund balance. You can see at the bottom there is a revenue shortfall of $871,000. This is actually less than last year. Last year we started 935. I've seen years when we started in the low 1 million, so it's not unusual. I will go through the expenditure side, which I overestimate things to begin with. And we'll talk about some of those things as we go through here that I'm allowed to talk about. Some of them get into negotiations and things of that nature. That will have to wait till executive session. One of the biggest things I had to do during this process was add a lot of people back into the program, or into the school district. Because you know, we've hired a lot of employees over the past 6 months. Some of it was based upon pulling back some students from BOCES to create our own self-contained classroom. So you can see a drop in the BOCES services, but increases in their salaries in the special education area. But we'll go through these things, and we'll talk briefly about some of these things. Like I say, personnel is just a lot of adding to it. There's really kind of nothing unusual as you go through the first 3 or 4 pages. Yeah.
Tom, before you go through the expenses side, I just had a couple questions on the revenue side. So with the Medicaid reimbursement, is it possible if the new tax law passes that this number is going to go down? Haven't I been reading through NISBA that Medicaid for education is going to do Ed?
It's not going to happen this year. Usually it takes a little while. I don't know, but I'll read up on it
Okay.
to see about that.
I think those conversations happen around whether the revenues projected from the tax cut don't meet expectations. There's ways that they can go to pull that from other sources. So it's not something that would happen for a couple of years at all.
Okay. I'll take a look, try to find out about that and read up on it, see if it might have an impact.
And then on the rental of the auditorium, do we rent other spaces? I'm just wondering, thinking
Yeah,
for long-range
yeah.
planning, if there are
No.
ways we can promote the rental of space.
We could, we do rent our ball fields from time to time, our gymnasiums to outside groups, so there are a few times which other than the auditorium is rented. There are spaces, I'm going to say, over at Chancellor that could be designated for rental, and we could take and discuss that at some point and see about what type of uses you would be okay with. If you think as though we could rent some of that space, now remember we're going into the capital project, we got to make sure we have that flexibility. But if we determine there is space, we could look to rent space, and we'd have to put an RFP out to have anybody who would want to use that space. But we can designate what type of activities can be in that space. Like it has to be a nonprofit. You don't want a for-profit in there that really muddies the water. So I mean, we can definitely discuss those possibilities.
And how do those rental rates get set? Do we have?
No, you go out and ask them what they're willing to pay.
But I'm thinking, you just said people aren't renting the auditorium because our fee is too high. So how does the fee get set?
Well, there are, when you look to rent a space for like a year, usually what you do is you put it out, and what you get back is how much that company is willing to pay for that space.
Through an RFP.
Through an RFP. So we don't set the price. They kind of set it. And then it's up to us whether or not we want to accept that or reject it. If you don't think we're going to get enough money for that space, then we say no, reject it. We could put it out the bid again and say, it's too low. Or we could put a minimum and say that, let's say it's a classroom that we have available, that you put a thing on it saying, will not accept any bids under $10,000. So anybody who replies, at least you know you're going to get 10 grand.
But if you had an RFP, would you be obliged to take the?
No, you're not. You always have the right to
Okay.
reject.
It would be
Always
just
have
purely
the right to reject.
based on like the most,
Yeah, and what fits that space.
right, okay.
You don't want to have.
Not purely driven by that.
Yeah, I mean you don't. I don't know for example,
Fiscal.
but you don't want to.
Market through.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean if you wanted to keep it educational
and appropriate to
for
the
like a
space.
preschool or an
Yeah.
after-school program or
Yeah.
you can even. I don't think you'd want to, but I think some schools run charter schools out of their actual schools themselves. So, I mean, you can designate what you're going to use that for. You can use it for senior citizen, you can use it for education, preschool, charter school. You can kind of designate what you're willing to put in there. There's a couple of things to factor into it. Is there parking in the parking lot? Does it disrupt the school day? Those are the things you don't want to have happen, even if you're going to get, if for some reason it's going to draw 50 people walking through the building every day. You may say, well, we're not sure if we want 50 people walking through the building every day. So you can really kind of take a look at it and determine what you want to do with that.
Diane?
Well, we actually have a fee schedule to rent the auditorium.
Yes.
To
For
rent
that,
it, yes, right. To rent it for, either an hourly or daily basis, but nothing permanently to say, I'm going to decorate.
Like a lease
this
for a year.
At least
Right,
for a
right.
year.
Per event basis.
Northern Dutchess is using the cafeteria to provide before and after school, services, so. But we're not receiving anything from them for that.
Liz?
I just have a quick question about the rental space. If someone does rent these spaces, do they bring their own insurance?
Oh, yes.
So it's not,
Mandatory.
okay.
It's mandatory, yeah. They'll have to have insurance. A person coming off the street can't rent
So if they trip and fall, it's going to be,
Yep.
okay.
And an organization that rents the auditorium for a dance recital has to provide their own insurance. I mean, even for a short-term rental, we're not assuming any of that liability.
Yeah, even if they're here for an hour, they don't have. The town comes in here to play basketball. We have an insurance agreement with us, so we're protected from those cases. Not completely, unless it's really our fault for some reason, but that's what we have insurance for.
Any other questions about the revenue side? Okay.
So on the rollover budget, it just going to give you some things. I didn't add added the people who were in the school, so we had to add things, really not so much to the administration portion, the first, those that start with the 1 series. So there's nothing that's been added to administration anyway, or operation and maintenance of keeping the current staff. So, you're not really seeing too much of a difference in these amounts here. So, as you go through, you do see increases to it. I'll tell you in executive session what you're seeing in front of you so that you have an idea of the total that's in the budget, in this rollover budget. I did not go, fine tooth, and just to let you know, I expect this to come down. So I don't want to worry you guys. I did overestimate things. I always want to start out higher and work my way down.
Start conservatively.
Start conservatively and along that line. So, and for like BOCES in a lot of cases, I went back through, got rid of services that we have reduced over the past year. And I did 2.5%. You'll see some of the individual lines for BOCES, you'll see them going down, some are increasing. But basically, I did go through that one based upon our current BOCES service request and added those things in. One of the things I forgot to put in here is Forecast 5. I did not add that into this. I didn't do that. It wasn't until I got completely done and started working on Forecast 5. I forgot to put that in the budget, but this is just a rollover. So in the first draft, it will be there.
And everything is a BOCES service, right?
Yes, it's a BOCES service, and I haven't decided where to
You
put it.
trust contract with everyone BOCES?
Yeah, it's everyone BOCES, correct. I am now on, let's see,
So what page are you on?
let's go to page number 7. And halfway down, you're starting with the regular school, and this is where the meat of the program is as far as costs of the school district. This is where teachers and everything related to instruction is. So, what I did take out of the budget is, I did take one elementary teacher out of the budget, anticipating 4 5th grade classes exiting, 3 incoming kindergarten. So that's what we've been doing over the past 4 or 5 years. This is 4. So one got taken out of there, so that's why you're seeing a reduction. There was some movement between the grade levels, so that all got re-put in, or got reshuffled around. You got to really look at it in total, not as by itself, because I put the leave of, we have 3 people who are currently on a leave of absence, putting those 3 back into the budget and taking the 3 long-term subs out of the budget. So that added extra to the budget above and beyond what was currently in there. So those are the type of things that we had in there. Also, there was some fine-tuning of some of these codes to get, as we see from time to time, the mix between the middle school and the high school changes. It's mostly, there's middle school teachers, a portion of their salary gets placed into the high school. Also been adding an extra $10,000 every year for teacher substitutes. It's just at this time we have a number of, it's really the substitutes don't take a whole lot. It's long-term subs that come in for teachers who have left during the year for various medical reasons typically. So that's really where the additional cost has come. It really hasn't been because our teachers have been out sick. It's more of the long-term subs. Because at that point, you're paying for two people. You're paying for the regular teacher and then for the substitute teacher who's in. One of the biggest things right below is the 2110-160, and that's the teacher aides. This is where a majority of our hiring has been over the past year for monitors and teacher aides. I expect this number to come down for a couple reasons. I've had a talk with Emily Davison. She is going to start doing her CSE meetings with the parents and that. And what happened this year and why we got an influx this year is, just so that you understand this, is we had a number of kids come in from outside the district with IEPs already in hand, and those IEPs said, you do the 1-to-1 aid. At that time, we don't know who these students are. We don't know if they really need the services or not. So as
Another school district.
said so. Some school districts, they're very open. Why not? No problem. But with, she's got to meet a lot of the kids now, see how their interaction is in the school district. We're a very different school district. We're a very good school district about handling students. In some school districts, it's much different. They need that 1-to-1 aid. In our school district, it's not as much, because we have a lot of supports here. So I would imagine that number is going to go down as we get closer and closer, as Emily makes the determination whether or not an aid is going to be needed for the following year. On top of that, the other thing too is some of these aids right now I have in 2110, they really belong in special education. One of the things that I will be doing over the year is not only breaking up between regular education and special education, but then by building. So that we'll know, when you see it by building, because there's federal guidelines coming down where I got to account for everybody by building. And we've never done that before in this category. Teachers, we always did that. But for a lot of the non-instructionals, we never did that. It's one category. So you'll see some changes there as we go through this process. If we then go to page number 12. This is where we're getting into special education. You'll see an increase in the first line there for the teachers. Remember, we created our self-contained classroom. Right, so teacher aide, 2 teaching assistants that were currently, they were in the 2110 regular teaching, got pulled out and put into this code. So that's the reason why that seems to be jumping up quite high. If we look below there, we see salaries clerical. I'm just calling it salaries non-instructional at this time. There was the addition of a interpreter for the deaf, who was originally in the BOCES budget in the 2250s down below. That number got taken out, and it is now an actual member of our staff. Occupational therapy and physical therapy, I just increased that just because of that self-contained classroom coming back to us. There are more services we have to provide. They were provided before by BOCES and paid through BOCES. Now we have our physical therapists and occupational therapists, which are outside consultants, who are now picking up that additional time. Yes.
Tom, wouldn't those have been in last year's budget, 17,800, or no?
No, we didn't create that self-contained classroom until August. So at the time,
They were in the BOCES budget.
Right, they were in the BOCES budget, but they were this. In fact, it made me think of, I'm going to have to transfer some monies over for the interpreter for the deaf.
That was a BOCES service
It was a
last
BOCES
year.
service last year.
They got out of the interpreter business, so
Yes,
we had to hire
because,
them.
and the reason for that is when you have a BOCES employee, you have to be shared with another district. This was with the child all the time, so they was
Yeah.
not. That was something that came down from Albany.
Can we also ask, I mean, you can't provide this information now, but maybe as we see the budget development process unfold, if we can look comparatively at what we were paying when these services were all done through BOCES and what the savings are in terms of, it'd be great to have that readily
Yep.
legible to us.
I got that.
Yeah,
I got that.
by moving it into the cost.
Yep.
Yeah, because that was a net savings.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It was.
and it's important to keep that in mind.
About halfway in the middle is tuition other. These are for students who go outside of our school district, go to Astor or Center for Spectrum Services, Evero. There's any number of schools in which we go to. I'm being very conservative here, very conservative. What I basically have done right now is kept everybody in their current placement, and at this time, 3 unanticipated between the tuition other and a couple lines down is BOCES services. In the past, I've only had 2. We're starting with 3 right now, unanticipated. We got that in the first couple of months after our previous budget got approved. So there's some cost escalations. We know of one graduation happening. Emily is very much looking to pull back a couple children out of these placements to go into the new self-contained. She's starting discussions with the parents, and as those become finalized, I can take them out of the budget. So I do expect this area here to go down. I just want to start high and work my way down from there.
Yeah.
Hopefully in the meantime, we don't have Russia students come to us. We just had one student move in much earlier last May after this was all done, who completely took up our 2 unanticipated and was a little bit more. It's a residential placement. So that completely took up my 2 unanticipated right away. So, if we look a little bit further down, occupational ed, I'm hoping I'm on the high side here, but we've seen a growing trend of more students going to the Center for
OCAD.
CTI. With this. So I don't have numbers from the guidance department as to the number of kids who are signed up for next year. This is just some inflated. I inflated it by a few more kids than typically, but we've been seeing that increase before. We're usually around 20 kids, and it's been 20 kids since I got here. Last year we're up to 30. And they're a little over $10,000 a piece. But it's a great service. We couldn't provide it here. There's no way we could. So we get good schooling down. Turn the page over. Just normal increases for some movement, which I'll talk to you about in executive session. Adding a little bit to the computer services. One of the things that is a little bit happening right now on the computer side of things, and believe me, this is just, I took last year's number and added some numbers to it. What's happening is we're having a lot of, I want to say a lot, increases to the maintenance contracts. We're not buying brand new, and some of ours are starting to age, so some of those maintenance contracts are getting a little bit more expensive, so I want to give ourselves some room there. But still, we can control that number through the leases too. And as we get closer to it, and Steve has had the ability to sit down with me and gotten numbers through BOCES, we can look to see how much we have available for potential leases next year, and what that could equate to in potentially other buying of equipment, or through the Smart Bond in different ways. But through the Smart Bond, it will take us a year and a half. So even if we started planning now, you probably wouldn't see that stuff next year. So that stuff would be 1920.
Smart Bond 1920.
Well, if the same amount of time next year as this past year, it'll be a year and a half.
So
Hopefully
it's a long time.
they'll move that
Hopefully it's
along.
getting better up there. Just the last line of this page for social work services, I've been trying to increase this a little bit every year more than before, is because
What page you want to talk?
this is the bottom of page 15.
Okay.
28, 25, and what this is for is, when we first created these positions, they were offset by federal product. So we never fully implemented their salaries into it because it was cost prohibitive at the time, because it would have been all generated with taxes. And so, but as we're seeing some grants, some of our grants are actually expanding in the amount because our free and reduced numbers are expanding, but other grants are getting smaller. And so this is just trying to balance it out, trying to put more monies towards it so that at some point we don't have to rely on those federal funds to pay for our social workers. Switching over to the next page, I'm recognizing up here with the co-curricular the positions that we had the money in the budget, but we did reduce about $8,000 worth of co-curriculars. The other, we had a $10,000 deduction for this. $8,000 was based on the salary part of it, $2,000 for the benefit portion of it. So that's kind of a reduction of that to reflect in the budget. One of the things a little bit towards the bottom under interscholastic athletics is BOCES services. It's the cost of refereeing and things of that nature just keep on escalating. So it's really just to keep up with that. We don't play fewer games, and so there's been a cost to that. So if we switch over to the next page, which deals with transportation, what I've done at this point is just put a 3% escalator clause in it. We'll just have to see what the transportation CPI is, and that doesn't come out till June. So this is just a guesstimate at this point. We're just going to have to wait and see where that goes. I do think I'm going to be able to take one additional bus off next year. It won't affect just the high school, middle school, taking one bus off of there, the one that isn't used for the elementary school. I think I can phase that out. There's one less bus we need to pay for. And I don't think it's going to interfere with the times of getting back over there, because this bus I can use to with the other drivers. The ones that are still going way out to Clinton, those are the ones that are tightest. I'm not changing anything about them. That seems to be working okay this year. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it's working okay. It's better than the year before. We'd like to get them back a couple minutes sooner, but we'll have to see until we get all the 5th graders up to 6th grade, exit all the 12th graders. We'll get a better understanding of what that looks like. I don't see it being any worse, only getting better.
And this doesn't reflect eliminating one of those funds?
No, it does not. It does not.
Yeah.
Until I do it, look at it and make sure I can do it. I don't want to take it out. When it comes to the employee benefits, go through a couple things here. The retirements, New York State Employees Retirement System, the rate kind of remains the same from the previous year. The teacher retirement system, actually the rate for ERS went down a bit, not a whole lot, it did go down a bit. The teacher's retirement system, that's different. They're going from 9.8 to possibly up to 11. So I budgeted for 11. So that right off the bat is a 10% increase. Just done that alone, let alone increases to salary. Increases to salary aren't huge. An adjustment for Social Security. I will talk about these a little bit more when we get to executive session, because it does involve negotiations. Health insurance. I originally done it at 16%. We did last year and said that's really not realistic, to tell you the truth. I set it at 10%, and I think it would be a 10 or lower this year. I will get to know more at our next meeting next week as to what our trend is, but our trend was looking 5%, which I think is a little too low. So, but I don't think we're going to hit a double digit this year. I really don't. So, a little just being a little cautious on that end. So we'll have to see where that definitely all goes. But I don't think I'll have to add to the 10% I originally budgeted for. Down below, we have our debt service. You can see there's very little difference. We're actually $725 more. But one of the good things, if you look below, is the installment purchase principal EPC. It doesn't always go out there, but the big one that starts at $129,138 just has an interest payment of $4,023. This will be the last year. This year that will be gone. That's what Sheldon tells me. I didn't double check him, but I believe in Sheldon. Next year is the last year of our energy performance contract from like the year 2000. So we still have another EPC, and that has a couple more years to run, but not too many more either. Right below it, the last line is interfund transfer. This is monies that we sent to the special aid fund to pay for summer handicap programs. I don't know if you know the exact how that works, but we get reimbursed 80% in the summertime. Only for the summertime, we get reimbursed 80% of approved expenditures. Okay? So you're seeing it's going up 28,000. 2,000 is just an increase. Put 26,000 down there in our audit this year. One of the items that was highlighted and put into the general fund is we had a balance in the special aid fund, federal funds, of $129,000 that is accumulated over a decade or two, a couple decades. It was determined we're never going to get that money. And we found out why, because certain services we were putting in over the decades, summer work study, where students will go out and work in a different setting or whatever. We found out you don't get reimbursed for that. That's totally on the school district. That is not a reimbursable. It's when a student goes to a school, is in a school during the summer. That's what you get reimbursed for. Transportation, for the tuition to the school and all that. But work studies, even during the regular year, are not reimbursed at all. It's not considered a school. Therefore, you do not get any reimbursement. So that was kind of new news to us. We've never known that before. And I know it happened in years past. So we learned our lesson. Christine went back and she was actually able to recoup a lot of monies that weren't claimed in prior years. So we know we cleaned everything up, and this is what our balance was. So as a part of the audit, we told them I would take 5 years to pay off this. I did not want to do it in 1 year, $130,000. They were okay with doing it over 5 years. So additional $26,000 in there to pay off the deficit that's in the special aid. So we'll have to see. Actually, we got a reimbursement from the school district, or not a school, from another school. Christine followed up on and got some money back from because realized after going through all the staffing and everything, we ended up overpaying the school district, or not a school district, a school. And we got our monies back today, which was really nice to see. It was a nice little check, about $4 grand. And very happy for Christine to get that back because the person who did it in the past never would have known that. So Christine really helped on that. Really helped out tremendously. We have a better handle on all that now. So as we see, it's a 5% budget to budget. That will not be the final. It will be lower than that. Like I said, I like to be very conservative the first time out. And even the first draft is going to be a little conservative because that's going to be everybody's wants and wishes from the administrators. And it's a matter of then going through and figuring out whether or not it's something you can afford. Now they know that really no new programs unless you're going to repurpose your money you currently have. If you want to do another course, fine. What course are you going to take out to replace it with? So we're not looking to add new programs, but if you want to repurpose money for programs, we said that's fine, but let us know what you're doing so that we're aware of it, especially if there's even any cost. So definitely more to come. Questions?
That was very helpful.
Well,
They're watching.
Well, it's good to see,
They're watching.
it's good to
They're
finally
watching.
we've been talking long-range planning about, when this moment comes, we're going to see this, so it's just good to get it in front of us.
Mhm. Yeah, there's a lot more work to do to the long-range plan too, there's no doubt about that. But that budget process is began, that's for sure, and principals and supervisors are putting together their budgets, and I will receive them the Friday before next Friday. I'm hoping to be able to work on them during the break. I am going to be away in Florida, but I should have time to be able to input everything, to be able to, so when I come back, you'll have numbers that we can, that it's that, so next board meeting. What's that?
Always screaming teenage boys.
Oh, no, we're all going our separate ways.
Oh, all right.
Everybody's going all different ways, so we'll find out how that is. Some people are going before Christmas and having Christmas at Disney, and that's, I don't know.
So are there any other questions for? Well, then, let's move on to board committee reports, policy.
Policy, that'll be me. All right, so we had a lovely policy meeting on November 30th. And Joe introduced the topic of social use of media policy, and will confer with legal. Steve Jensen has already collected information from other districts regarding social media policy. Naming of donations. If someone makes a donation and wants a plaque, does the board want to pursue this or take off the table? I will continue and we'll discuss. The committee reviewed the following policies. Policy 8530, cafeteria meal charges. We're up to date with our policy, and we'll start using the school messenger system to notify families Wednesday and Sunday when their accounts have become past due. And this is separate from the notifications we get from the nutrition people when our balance is low. Policy 4526, use of computers by staff and students. We're waiting to hear back from legal, but do change the word of cyberbully to bully. Policy 5161, truancy and tardiness. Needs review regarding if the two subjects should be separated and what are the consequences for chronic tardiness. Joe will discuss with building principals. 5155, subsection 5, student withdrawal from school. Changes in wording. First sentence, withdrawal to May. Joe will check with Ed Davenport regarding conflict between students' intentions and parents. 5220, student publications. Joe will ask legal regarding permitting or denying religious subjects and what is disruptive. Joe will also check with building principals regarding guidelines and remove wording if none are in place. Policy 5305, eligibility for extracurricular activities. Checking with Steve Boucher and Ed Davenport regarding last sentence of number 3 and removing. Policy 5230, school dances. Joe to add language regarding attendance. If you are not in the school the day of the dance, you can't go to the dance. Policy 5240, public performances by students. Remove number 2, not aligned with current practice. Policy 5311.4, care of school property by students. Last sentence to be removed. 5420, students' health services, review by nurse and physician. Policy 5500, student records. Legal counsel recommends a line for parents to opt out and a secondary limited directory. Refer to legal regarding groups that have affiliation to the school, thinking there should be some requirement to get information from the school, and clarify who is allowed to get school attendee information. Policy 5680, student fees, fines, and charges. Add school equipment to the title. And policy 6110, 6113, 6210, 6240, 5751, Tom Burnell's title to read Assistant Superintendent for Support Services. Our next meeting is December 14th, respectfully submitted by Elizabeth. Oh, so what do you guys think about the plaque?
Could you apprise us of the issues?
Apparently it took place before.
These are old
I was
issues.
around,
All
old
right.
issues. But it was in regards to if a group or individual donates, wants to donate money, but also wants to have a plaque put in place as well. Do we want to accommodate that, or do we want to not? Opinion?
So are we talking about recognition for the donation, or I'm thinking about, a bench in a garden, in memory of what
We're talking about recognition for the donation.
Okay, and are there concerns around doing that?
There were some concerns raised years ago. This is not a recent,
Oh.
current issue at all. This has no nexus with anything that's
This just
in
came
the
up.
hopper right now, because we're
It
reviewing
was-
all our policies.
yeah.
Is there a policy speaking to this in one way or another?
Well, I don't believe
I don't
it
think
addresses
so.
that issue,
Yeah.
but it goes along with
So,
what policy.
for example, like,
It wasn't a policy, it's discussing if we're going to do
Right.
it.
Right.
so for example, the RSF donates money to buy 20 computers. Do we want to have a label on each computer that says, money contributed by the RSF, just using them as an example, or is it sufficient to just have a little sign, where the computers are placed that says these 20 computers are, one of the funds for these computers are contributed by RSF, or do we want to not have it all just like a letter entry for their donation?
Diane?
There was issues about, who pays for that plaque or that recognition, do you want that? Because sometimes there's a lot of things donated, so do you want plaques on everything and how will that come about? Or is it just like donations of
Over a certain
amount,
level,
or, because you could end up with have plaques all over the school, right? So.
Steve?
And then everybody's asked for, sorry, everyone has asked for, some
Yeah.
groups are looking for
Right.
that, and some groups just make the donation. So does the school decide, anytime a donation comes in, we'll create a plaque, or we'll ask them to create it, or?
I agree, I think that plaques are not something that's manageable, but, like a donor tree or something may be a way to go, where everything's kind of centralized in one area, maybe limit, the size of it. It has to be over X dollars to be on the tree, or higher on the tree, whatever. But I think it's nice to see people that come through the building, to see other people that have given money or donated things of value, because it may prompt more people to do it. So I think like maybe a centralized place might be better than putting plaques or stickers all over the place. I think I'd be a little bit against that.
I mean, just think about, in a given year, how many donations we approve. Just about every board meeting, we're approving a couple, 3, sometimes there are multiple donations within, sometimes they're for activities, so that you can't put a plaque on an activity, obviously, but sometimes they're things, so, and that's, well, we want to just get some feedback from the board and see where, if
Jacqueline?
any place we should take this.
I really like Steve's idea of having a donations tree. I'm not crazy about the idea of having plaques all over the place. I think that could really get out of hand. I think the tree also has potential for it being made by students, whether ceramics or art, fabric, whatever. I mean, there are a lot of ways where students can get involved in making something that grows artistically, that grows creatively, and within the school as well.
I'll call it myself and say that would obviate the cost, right, factor that we would raise in terms of if the district would somehow have to get special plaques. If it was a student project, that would be really interesting. I like the idea of a centralized place for recognizing donations, and also it would have the impact of, I think, making people feel a continuing desire to contribute. So, and you wouldn't have to make decisions about including or excluding if you find a way to make space in this tree or whatever the form would be. So,
But I think it's practical to have some sort of
like seal floor, ceiling, floor?
Well, and probably some sort of understanding of whether it's for activities or for a field trip or
Right.
for 20 computers or a lab, or, you know, there are sort of levels of,
Yeah, giving.
you know, we also approve a lot of donations for professional development. You can't go black on that, right?
Yeah.
So I think it will take some thinking about all the situations that we approve donations for.
There could also be some sort of, you know, donations book, something that is in some kind of public space with laminated pages or whatever that shows, oh, these are all the donations that we just keep track of. Just brainstorm, you know.
I think that over time, it would get to be an unmanageably large tree.
With the leaves fall
With
off
the
after a
leaves
time.
falling off. I think,
And
yeah.
new leaves would grow.
I mean, we get a lot of donations. And
We do.
even today, there's some rather large ones.
Very, yeah.
So I'm just
Generous.
thinking, you know, over the course of time, this tree could get unmanageable. The book might be more, not as visually beautiful and impactful when you walk in the door, but it might be easier to manage.
Maybe it makes sense, sorry, but just put something on our webpage like this is, I make a donation and just a list of like,
There
these
you
are
go.
things. we-
And that's
No,
dynamic.
a digital.
Digital.
A digital tree.
You know, that way nobody has to like update the book, forget to update, you know, I
Well, now we
mean,
got
it's
Steve
easier
doing
to do it there and, like, where do you put the book?
That's screen with the
We're all
Could be
weather.
practicing a
What about
student one
that,
too.
what about that screen with the weather?
There's
The
a
weather.
Good.
There's that weather thing out there.
It's always, yeah.
We don't control the content.
Oh, all right, all right.
Could put some commercials in it.
I think we just like to show our time. All right, forget about the weather screen.
So,
So I
Back
think
to
we,
it.
well, just in the interest of time, I think we
Yes.
have a sense of the kinds of things that the boards would support. So the policy committee will go back to the drawing board and we'll come up with a proposal,
Here you go.
wrapped in a policy.
Creative proposal. All right, very good. Any other questions for policy? Laura?
Yes, so 5,500 student records. So you're going to ask legal about groups with affiliations to the school and what kind of information they should be, you know, have access to? Is that-
Correct.
There was a suggestion at one time that that policy not only list directory information, but also call out limited directory information. Like directory information currently involves name, address, phone number, contact information, height and weight, like for athletic, for athletes, sometimes the newspapers are asking for that kind of information. And quite frankly, a lot of that information is information that a group, for example, like the PTSO, really has no need or purpose for having some of that information. So if we were to develop a truncated list of a limited directory information like name, address, telephone number, period, that maybe a group that was looking to contact a group of people, that would be sufficient to give them and not give them all this other information that they don't need, don't want. That was the discussion.
But would this limited access apply universally to all affiliated groups?
Yeah, well, I think that was the thinking.
Okay.
That was it. Not just anybody who comes along and
No, of course,
wants the
but,
stuff.
you know, one group versus another. This one can have this, and this one we're not going to give it to.
No, it's the affiliated organizations. It's a good way to put it.
Okay. So let's move on to, we have 2 sets of minutes from long-range planning.
Yes, we did.
Yes, so Diana are going to tag team, Diana and I are going to tag team this because I set the question, she answers it. All right, so let's see, forecast 5, all the data has been uploaded. Diane's going to tell you what we saw. Tom was explaining there's state mandated long-range financial plans that have to be generated, and he's working with his group, Ms. Asbo, to develop that 5-year plan. It's got to include all our fund balance projections and reserve usage over the 5-year period. The only thing he can possibly do that's reasonable is to take the information we know currently and project it forward 5 years. He can't start thinking, well, in 2 years, this number might go up, this number might go down. So they really play it out a straight sort of, this is what we know now. From that long-range financial plan, lots of what-if scenarios can be created, and this plan will be presented to Joe as a working document for our planning purposes. It's not going to be presented as the long-range financial plan, which would then have to be approved by the board and published publicly. So he's working with Joe to create the state-mandated long-range financial plan. The parent survey is now not going to, it didn't close on the 8th, it will close this Friday, the 15th. And hopefully we'll have more information on the return on that. We started talking about master schedules and teacher FTEs, which Diane's going to talk more about. We generated a couple of questions for John Kevitzer at Davenport. The idea of grade courses being combined 7th and 8th. We have a 9-10 study hall versus an 11-12 study hall. They're both low numbers in those two sections. Can they be combined? Is there a reason they have to be separate? We have a number of algebra offerings. What are the reasons for the different levels? So Joe and Tom met with the secondary principals, and Diane will answer those questions. And Joe also shared at the end of that meeting that he had gone to a meeting of the county superintendents at Dutchess Community College. There was some discussion about the need for remediation when kids get to DCDC. And Joe was happy to report that Rhinebeck graduates are among the smallest numbers of kids who need remediation, especially in math. There are other areas that have plenty of kids that need remediation, but they have different socioeconomic and size issues, so it's hard to do an apples-to-apples correlation, but we were noted as one of the least need. So. And then I'm going to hand it over to my friend. Oh, sorry, question.
That element about small cohort of students, 2 to 3 needing remediation, does that mean only 2 to 3 students needed remediation?
Yeah, coming out of Rhinebeck.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we met Monday, and Joe and Tom back with some answers to those questions that we had, so we're looking at the master schedule. So we had a question about the video production class, for instance. There can only be actually a maximum of 10 kids in that classroom. It's a small room, and it only has 6 computers, so that's why there are 2 of the same classes there. So we talked about if we would want computers in there, or a different room. We don't have the answers to that, but that's why there are 2 classes. They're the same. The study halls, we have 2 study halls, one with 9th and 10th graders, one with 11th and 12th. The reason they do this is they make the 9th and 10th grader study hall is a quiet study hall, traditional study hall, where the upperclassmen are given the opportunity to talk. It's a little more relaxed. That's why they're separated at this time. And that's something, it doesn't have to be done that way. That's why it's done that way currently. The math classes, we have some small sections of math classes. This is done to accommodate some students that might struggle. It's also similar with some of our foreign language. That's why we tend to keep those smaller. That's the reason there. And our PE classes are broken down by grade, and it started about 2 years ago. The PE staff, they want to differentiate the instruction so that they're not doing the same lesson each year, so it's a little bit different. But that tends to give we've asked if all of our staff is currently, has a duty in their schedule, and came back that everyone that is supposed to have a duty has a duty. There are teachers that don't have a duty, they have other responsibilities, but everyone that should have one doesn't. We then talked about the process for student schedules. So currently in the high school, students will meet with their guidance counselors in the spring. They'll talk to them about what classes they'd like to take. The master schedule is completed, and then over the summer, those requests are put in. There's usually more requests than are able to fit the schedule. But in the meantime, for instance, on June 1st, the teachers need to be notified what they'll be teaching next year. So that deadline is June 1st. The board, by June 15th, will get approval. There's classes that have low enrollment, and we have to approve if that class should go forward. The problem is, schedules really aren't finished till August, and then there's a lot of changes that happen then. So what might happen is, a class might have 20 kids in it, then come August, maybe 10 of those kids or 15 of those kids didn't fit in that class, or they changed it or something, and then all of a sudden there's 4 kids. But now, because of these deadlines, there's really not too much you can do. So we did talk about if it's possible for the schedule to be done earlier, the schedules be done by June 1st. That's something that Joe's going to look into if that's possible. That would be a big change for everybody, having it done earlier. It might make changes not as possible to be done if it's set earlier, but it could help with decision making. If you know in June, what classes you have, then you can really actually decide if you run a class with kids or kids, and there's still maybe an opportunity to do something. A lot of the changes, not clear whether they're changes that we can get a schedule to get into a class, or if it's more of they want to get into lunch period or preference. Then that's something Joe's going to bring back some information about that. And we did talk about district tuition rate. Districts can charge whatever they like for out of resident students. In order to follow what the state suggests for us. We did talk about if we lowered that, would that maybe bring more kids in, and it could, but would that really be fair to taxpayers who are paying taxes for kids to go here? We're charging a very low rate. If you charge a low rate, there's still a cost to educate every child that comes here. If you charge something very low, it could end up actually being a burden on the district to do that. But it is something that people are probably not aware of, that you can pay tuition and go to public school. You can get an opportunity. It's not something that we've ever really publicized, but it's a fact.
Can I just correct one thing there
Yes.
that I didn't correct when we were discussing that?
Yeah.
You don't have to allow students to attend on a tuition basis. That's the option of the local school. And in fact, our neighbors to the north, at least until recently, did not allow tuition students. So you don't have to. If you do, then you charge tuition typically, and the state has a tuition formula that we use, some other school districts use. You don't have to use it, but it's a third-party, independent amount of money, so there's no dickering about you're charging too much, you're charging too little. No, we're charging the state formula, so it's cut and dry. But
Yeah.
not every place will take you as a tuition student. Not every public school will take you, and they don't have to.
And we saw that reflected in the rollover budget, right, with that figure of $25,000, that
Yeah.
represented tuition-paying students.
Yeah.
Who are in the district. now.
Currently, yes. We used to have more, but I think the bottom falling out of the stock market back in 2008, that started to dry up. People send their own homeschool district because of the cost.
So, yes. And I see that we follow the state formula. Does that end up being roughly what it costs
That's
students? Or is that
to-
what the formula aims to do?
Yes, that's what the formula aims to do. I
It's
couldn't
not
sit here and
perfect,
say
right, yeah.
it does or doesn't. I'm not saying it doesn't, but that's the theory is, and it's like every other state formula. It's like making sausage, You don't want to know what goes into that sausage, but it's their attempt to say, these are your costs here, 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 these are your expenses, here, 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 here. Take a few turns on it, that's what it costs you to educate a student.
Just to point out that our next meeting, which now won't be the 20th, we're inviting Steve Boucher to talk about the athletic
We're
program.
still trying to figure out the day, right?
Mhm.
It's okay.
It's the same.
Okay, so next we have curriculum committee meetings, and I'm reporting. We had pretty much our entire meeting was given over to looking at that slide deck that has been reproduced in your packet. And so there's a lot of information captured there, and Marvin did try to kind of pull out some of the big takeaways and things we should understand moving forward. As we all know, Common Core standards were implemented in 2011-12, and what we're looking at now is a kind of a new next generation of standards. It's no longer Common Core standards, not only in math and ELA, but looking at social studies, science, and the arts. And the assessments for this new curricula will be coming through the pipeline by 2020-21. So unlike the kind of first rollout of standards where there was an incredibly hasty push on developing curriculum and assessments were almost immediately following the new standards being pushed out, there's a lot of time and consultation going into this process, for which I think we should all be really grateful. Of course, our new commissioner has been very dedicated to this, and Marvin talked to us about some kinds of revisions, changes, corrections, more developmentally appropriate standards in certain cases, and of course this is a critique that has been being made vigorously for several years. In our own case in Rhinebeck, the curriculum being developed was customized, it was Rhinebeckized, as we like to say. It was not curriculum in a box. So a lot of what we have in our curriculum is very strong. We still stand behind what we have in place, but there will be inevitable changes and adjustments, particularly math and ELA, based on this move. So Marvin did talk to us about the various changes in math and ELA first. We spent most of our time talking about that. We had some real questions about what's happening with the Chancellor math curriculum, and as he pointed out, there is no product on the market right now, currently today, that is 100% aligned with the new standards. So he's counseling caution and consultation and really understanding what is required before making a commitment to the new math curriculum. We talked a bit about the ELA revisions, and I, at least personally, was quite gratified to hear that some of the very mechanistic, percentage-based approaches to what kinds of material you're teaching, reading through or literacy through, is sort of being set aside, and that the new goal is to foster lifelong practices of readers and writers, and that's across disciplines. It's more holistic. There's also been an effort to reduce repetition and redundancy in the standards. The social studies standards we were very excited to hear about because they represent a rather significant move away from constantly justifying what we do in the classroom in terms of making people ready to get a job, which will continue to be important, of course, but thinking about a renewed emphasis on civic awareness and participation, what we used to call citizenship, seems to be making a comeback, and empowering students to think of themselves as active and engaged citizens seems to be very much at the heart of this enterprise. Marvin talked about this concept of epistemic literacy. How do we know what we know? How do we evaluate, right, sources? And obviously this is something that's incredibly important for not only for our students, but for all of us today. So this is actually at the center of the new social studies standards. The art standards are just beginning to be discussed, and we did not get into any detail about that. We asked some questions about assessment and the approach to assessment, and Marvin did remind us that we will be looking at a much wider range of measures in social studies and science, as well as math and ELA, but we'll be looking at things like school climate and social emotional well-being as indices of how well a school district is doing. Of course, much remains very uncertain at the federal level. With all of this, we were really talking in New York State terms. And in general, I will just reiterate what Marvin stressed, that this is a much more consultative and experience-based process of talking through the standards. The idea is for people to really understand the standards who are developing the curriculum along with the teachers. And Marvin has been very engaged in county level and state level planning sessions around all of this. He pointed to the ways in which the curricula are really being aligned with the sort of best practices of professional groups such as the National Science Teachers Association. So it was a lot, we learned a lot, and there's much more in the slides for everyone.
I thought the curriculum did great, the narratives on each one of those topics. But since we just discussed budgets, what's the impact for future budget years for all the professional development? Any gut sense yet? Should we be planning
What do you
for
think,
something?
Joe?
Well, you know, for,
That was my first question, Joe.
I mean, it's kind of a mixed blessing, but as many of you are aware, the state has been changing these norm standards pretty much every 3 years. So not that we wanted to be, but I think we have de facto been in this cycle of rewriting this stuff every few years. So again, just off the top of my head, it's not like we haven't developed curriculum for 5 years and all of a sudden, you know, we're going to see this huge uptick. I think it's going to be up here and it's going to continue along there. The other thing is, as Deirdre mentioned, is since we've been developing most of our own curricula and we've been making it fit our students, I'm thinking and we're hoping that it's not going to be a jarring change, like we're going to throw all of those out, start over from scratch. I think we're going to build on what we have. So in terms of how much time it's going to take to do that, I'm guessing that not starting from scratch is going to take less time and cost less money than modifying what we already have. That's pretty high quality stuff. So we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater here. So I'm hoping that we are able to do what we need to do within the parameters of what we've been budgeting for curriculum development. We may have to reprioritize some things, but I think we'll be able to make it work. That's my takeaway right now. I have not had Marvin say, whoa, we're going to have to put another $100,000 in because we got to have all this additional curriculum development. I think we'll probably be in an okay place.
But the heavier lift will be in social studies
Right.
and science, right? ELA and math.
Yes, but again, remember, we've got like 3 or 4 years to be working on this. It's not like in other iterations of this, it's been like, do this by September.
The runway's longer.
Yeah, so that'll at least spread that out, or we'll get it done and then we'll have it. So I think that's the benefit of the fact that this commissioner, I think for a lot of good reasons and for a lot of pragmatic reasons, like rebranding these standards, the next generation standard instead of Common Core, and getting some of that flashpoint verbiage out of there and off the discussion table, and building in more time for this to be done is going to result in a better product, because we're not rushing this thing out way too fast and then testing it before our teachers even have a chance to teach it, and then everything is playing catch up. It doesn't seem like we're in that mode this time around. So that's a good thing.
Any other questions? Okay, how about finance?
Finance. December 7th was our meeting, Finance Committee. We reviewed the cafeteria revenue and expenditures. Tom reviewed the new format for tracking the cafeteria expenses and revenues. We discussed the rollover budget, which we have also gone over. And Tom started a very preliminary assessment of our budget for 2018-2019, and it stressed that this is just a starting point based on assumptions. Variables include how much state aid we will receive, BOCES refunds, etc. Our next meeting is January 4th at 2018.
Questions or comments for finance? Yes, Laura?
Really more a comment on, I didn't compare this sheet to how we used to track meals, but it seems much more user-friendly. It's cleaner, but I'm taken aback a little bit by the percentage of kids getting free and reduced lunch and breakfast. It's a pretty high number. I'm glad we're able to provide it, but it's on a percentage basis. It's
Yeah, and it's increased even more since here. We captured a lot of, all the new students. There's a new way of doing, we get a list of SNAP and Medicaid recipients, and we, on a quarterly basis, I have to download it. And so we just downloaded it again in November, kind of a month ahead of schedule, but why not get it done? And all of a sudden, a lot of kids popped up that weren't known to us, because the state didn't know those were our kids. The state, because Marvin's upload of, which happened in October, of all our students, included all our new kindergartners and all the kids who moved in over the summertime. Some of them had already applied for it and got free and reduced, but we identified a lot more kids. One of the other things that we also noticed is that there were a number of children who are eligible but don't want it. Okay, some families, but we get to include them in our counts. Those counts count towards a lot of our federal programs are based on the number of free and reduced. That number's gone up quite a bit. I mean, when I started here at 6%, we're now into the 20s, maybe approaching 25%.
Yeah, that's a big jump.
Yeah, well, we're also catching, the new system is a lot easier to
Capturing
catch.
more.
Okay.
It's a lot easier to capture the kids.
So the utilization, I guess one thing I would want to know is what's the utilization in terms of like we have now we know more students are eligible, but if we actually figure out what percentage of students don't utilize.
Oh, there's a fair amount. But we can work on
Okay.
that.
Yeah, that's pretty stunning change. Just in the last year.
And just one other question. Salary and benefits seem to have jumped by half between September and October. Did we hire a bunch of people?
No. There are a 2-week lag period. So your October numbers have September. So we're running about 2 weeks behind when it comes to salaries. So that's why you're seeing it. And the other thing too, it could have been October, could have been 3 payrolls. So you're going to get a jump here and there. So it isn't going to be consistent. But we have the same number of hours that we did the previous year.
Yeah, we have increased our
We haven't increased the number of hours our staff does.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I believe we'll discuss personnel.
Yes.
later. Okay. So on to comments. Good news. Oh, Steve has some good news. Share it. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I come up with that out.
Just to give another shout out to Justin Randall. He attended RSF's donor party. Two of his kids from his computer class who demonstrated some of the apps that they built and spoke to the program and how great they thought it was. So it was a really nice presentation that they did.
What class is that? Is that introduction to
AD Comp Science.
AD Comp Science? Oh, okay.
I tried to get in there to see those apps, but his room was so popular. It was hard to get in. Really, during the open, well, so for good news, I'm just going to say, I thought it was wonderful yet again that we had these sort of open format, open house, where one of the 2 days for conferences, the teachers kind of hold open office hours, and you could just drop in and say hello, and I think that it's a really great practice, and I hope the BLPT and all concerned resolved to continue. Good news. Old business.
Yeah, I'll bring something up under old business. I actually could have brought it up under, well, you tell me. You can be the judge. I could have brought it up under board committee reports, but the meeting just happened today. Mark and I attended a meeting of the Rhinebeck Collaboration today. It had been rescheduled from last month because Mayor Bassett had a conflict last month, so we rescheduled it to today. It was me, Mark, Gary Bassett, Rick Lewitt, and that was it. Elizabeth Swindsey was ill, so she was not able to attend. But we had a pretty good meeting. And just to highlight a few of the things, some of the stuff would come under good news, I think. Gary was absolutely singing the praises of our school's cooperation with the village. He rattled off a number of projects that they're working on. Kids involved with their tree planting efforts. Kids involved with their records retention efforts at the village hall. Pat Kuhn coming to speak to college and careers class here. And the village and the journalism class collaboration on working on a village newsletter. In fact, Gary and Pat and several other members of the village staff, not sure exactly which departments they were from, met here in our school at the end of last week, maybe Thursday morning, to talk about this village newsletter that they're working on. They broke up into work groups with members of the village staff and our students, and Gary said that he's just really impressed with how well we're working with them, and they're certainly working with us as well. And they did make the note today that he said, I don't think that any of this stuff would have happened if we hadn't started meeting and talking. He said that Gary could make more. So anyway, that was kind of a good good pat on the back. We did have a discussion briefly about the new peddlers permits, which groups, both school groups and other community groups, are required to have. Again, I don't get too deeply into that. It's kind of a school issue only in that school groups that want to sell or distribute whatever during Santa Claus or the Christmas tree lighting or whatever will need to get a peddler's permit. There's no charge for not-for-profits to do that. Anyway, that was another topic. Rick talked about, I guess they're going to hear next week about the block grant that they wrote for a crosswalk where the deli used to be, crossing Market Street. Their long-range goal is that this is part of their long-range goal to improve the walkability of the village to our schools, in particular to Chancellor. We talked a little bit about possibly doing something to even if it's a short piece at a time, to start to finish that run along Knollwood from South Parsonage down to the Chancellor Livingston School. We talked a little bit about traffic through the intersection at North Parsonage, South Parsonage and North Park, and they're very conscious of that and have done some striping on the section from, if I got it right, from North Park to Knollwood, and are addressing the issues of speeding on that section, and obviously they're addressing it as a village and a village police department. So they brought that up. I didn't bring that up, actually, although Mark did say that we had an inquiry about that. I talked to them about renewing our plan to use village hall, as well as ultimately the town hall and the Good Shepherd Church, the Old Bulkley School, as evacuation sites for our students in emergency. Should we have to evacuate both buildings, those are the closest places by walking distance that could house our kids, temporarily until parents can pick them up or whatever. So Gary said, fine, just write us a letter, and they'd be glad to have the village board approve that. So I'm going to essentially send the same letter to the village, to the town, as well as to the Good Shepherd Church, and ask for their permission to allow us to. I mean, we've always had that in our plan, but it occurred to me fairly recently. The pastor of the Good Shepherd Church is new. Gary Bassett's the new mayor. Elizabeth is relatively new. I mean, when you look over the span of 20 years, and I'm wondering how many of them even realize that's where we're going if we have to evacuate. Might be a good idea to renew that arrangement with the new people who are sitting there. So Gary's very supportive of that, so I'll be doing that with all 3 of those locations. They're looking to hire a new emergency response coordinator to replace Henry Campbell, who passed away at least several months ago. Talked about the sidewalks and Chancellor on Knollwood. There was a lot of that meeting. We've heard a lot of good out, so just want to bring you guys up to speed on that.
Thanks.
Just a quick question, for a sore topic. The peddler permits, so if our clubs just wanted, is it only when there's events?
No.
Like if our clubs just wanted to, on a random
Yes.
Saturday, sell something?
Yes.
they need a permit?
Like, for example, the Boy Scouts sell pumpkins on a random Saturday and Sunday. They will now have to get a peddler.
So no matter
Peddler.
what.
That's my understanding.
Yeah, and
From a-
having been through it, the permitting process is not difficult. It's a matter of filling out a form, and an adult who is a part of the group has to provide a driver's license for
And they run a background
a
check.
background check. It's not that hard. And for a real vendor, there's a lot more stringent. There's a fee, there's fingerprinting, there's all sorts of stuff that they have to do for not-for-profit. It's just about
Yeah, it sounded to me like they're trying to control people out of the local area from coming in and selling whatever, for good or bad, for better or for worse. They're trying to give priority to the local community groups, so they reserve the right to tell somebody maybe from outside of the area, no, we're not giving you a permit. We already have 3 groups that are selling hot dogs and hot chocolate at Sinterklaas, so we don't need a 4th hot dog vendor without a pretty comprehensive peddler permit. They have no way of keeping track as to who's there, who has permission to be there. The police have no idea who's supposed to be there, who's not. I assume they give you a little certificate or something that you have to show. So it would be a ridiculous job for the police to stop everybody and ask, are you from Rhinebeck? So it seems like a reasonable idea. I wanted to bring it up just because I want to make sure our principals know that their school groups who may want to be doing that need to get a peddler's permit. I didn't have a problem with it at all. I just needed more information about it. So he was great about walking us through the process.
One of the things also is needed is insurance. That's another thing. I want to see if I can get a blanket insurance from Utica National as opposed to doing it every time
For
you
school
Yeah.
do something. It's like, can I get it for this? Can I get it for that?
Yeah.
Our insurance company's great, but if they can give us just a blanket to be able to give the village
Yeah.
done and
Great.
over with.
Oh, that'd be great.
That makes sense. Yeah. So that was our meeting with Rick and with Gary.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's a good meeting.
Since we have no public, we will not ask for comment. Other? Okay. We are prepared to move to our action items. May I ask if anyone wishes to remove anything from the consent agenda? Okay. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? It's unanimous, that motion passes. Action item 6.2. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve as a first reading the consideration of modifications to the following board policies. Number 5240, public performances by students. Number 5311.4, care of school property by students. Number 5305, eligibility for extracurricular activities. Number 5680, student fees, fines, and charges for school equipment. Number 5751, video cameras. Number 6110, budget planning. Number 6113, dissemination of budget recommendations. Number 6210, local tax levy. And number 6240, investments.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion or comments?
So I just had a comment on policy 5305, eligibility for extracurricular activities. I would like to recommend in the chart on the second page, where it says participant, substance, first violation, and repeat violation, that we add in a verb like requires or required in the middle, so instead of reading, so that it would read, for example, under athlete, first violation, ineligible for athletic competition for up to 20% of the season's contests, round to the nearest and whole contest, and required successful completion of an educational component as designated by the Wilmington School. When I read through these the first time, I couldn't quite follow the language, so we'd like to recommend clarification.
Okay, thank you.
Friendly amendment, as this is a first reading.
Friendly.
It's a friendly amendment. Very helpful, very helpful. Any other comments?
Opposed to a growly.
A growly amendment, a super crabby amendment.
Thank you, Jack. Yeah,
Yeah, no, it's good to increase the legibility of what we're looking at. So, any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor? As amended.
Okay, so you will see, more likely see this same list on your first January board meeting with the happy amendment. And you'll be asked for a final reading on these, and then they're get uploaded to the website, and they're good to go until the next policy committee decides that it needs to be changed for one reason or another. So, thank you.
Excellent.
Yep.
Okay, item 6.3, may I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the list of additional emergency conditional substitute teachers and non-instructional staff for the 2017-18 school year?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the memorandum of understanding between the Rhinebeck Central School District and the County of Dutchess through the Dutchess County Department of Behavioral and Community Health, DCBCH, to permit DCBCH to use the Rhinebeck Central School District buildings, grounds, and equipment for mass immunization and prophylaxis in the event of a public emergency, effective January 1st, 2018 through December 31st, 2018. See attached.
Second.
Any discussion?
We have done this annually for the last number of years, so it's not a good thing.
All those in favor? It's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept the following awards from the Rhinebeck Parent Teacher Student Organization, PTSO, in the total amount of $10,440 as follows. CLS Grades K through 5 Special Area Winter Olympics Project, submitted by David Wolfen in the amount of $440 as stipulated. And District K through 12 Arts in Education Fund, to support the integration of the arts into the core academic curriculum in the amount of $10,000 as stipulated.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. I'd like to thank PTSO for these generous gifts to the those in favor? That is unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve additional coaches, advisors for the 2017-18 school year, effective November 6, 2017, in accordance with the 2016-17 RTA salary schedule. Boys basketball varsity, David Airstock, $4,532. Modified, Mark Berg, $2,541, and assistant, Bill Hoynes, volunteer. Girls basketball, JV, George Nicolatos, $3,136. Modified, Jake Slate, $2,541, and assistant, Mary Fuchs, volunteer.
Second.
Any discussion?
I was going to say that I appreciate the volunteers that come forward. It makes a big difference to our programs, and we're getting a lot of time.
And just so everybody knows, the volunteers are all certified coaches. Either they already have the certification or they go through the process. So they're quite capable legally, if in no other way, to be working with our kids and have responsibility for them.
All those in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve an extension of the leave request under the Family and Medical Leave Act from Karen Signor, having commenced on September 28, 2017 through December 3, 2017, now extended through February 12, 2018, with such leave to be taken as paid medical leave through the period of disability as certified by physician in writing to the extent of her accrued sick leave.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the appointment of additional enrichment program advisors for Chancellor Livingston Elementary School for the 2017-18 school year? See attached.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the appointment of Allison Knowles as a long-term substitute in the position of grade 6 science at the Bulkley Middle School, effective on or about January 2nd, 2018 through approximately March 23rd, 2018, at the pleasure of the board, at the per diem substitute teacher rate, or at step 1BA, $52,914 prorated, if the leave extends beyond 30 days in accordance with the RTA salary schedule for 2016-17. This appointment is to fill the vacancy created by the leave of absence granted to Ashley Wilsey, grade 6 science teacher at the Bulkley Middle School.
Second.
Any discussion?
Can we table this?
Yes. There's been a motion to table. All those in favor? Okay. This motion has been tabled. Okay. Item 6.10, may I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to abolish a 12-month typist 1 position effective December 31st, 2017, and to create a 10-month typist 1 position?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the appointment of additional advisors for Rhinebeck High School for the 2017-18 school year? See attached.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve a medical leave request under the Family and Medical Leave Act from Gretchen Horner, teaching assistant, having commenced on December 11th, 2017, until on or about January 16th, 2018, or upon clearance by her healthcare provider to return to work?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the civil service appointment of Ralph Chinese to the position of teacher aide at 6.5 hours per diem with a 26-week probationary period, effective September 6, 2017, at a salary of step 1, $21,652, in accordance with the ANI salary schedule for 2017-18.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the following resolution? Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Rhinebeck Central School District approve the corrective action plan that addresses the Office of the State Controller's Audit Report number 2017M-135, dated September 2017. The corrective action plan is attached.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Yes, Laura?
I have a quick question on recommendation 8. It says, what does it say? The board should ensure district officials establish written procedures to supplement the board policy or provide specific guidance for performing day-to-day extra classroom activities. This is the responsibility of the Board of Education. How are you anticipating that we monitor that?
Making sure I get it done, is what it is.
So we just
You're
keep
responsible
reminding
for
you.
making sure I do what
Okay.
that says. I can't be responsible for myself,
And
at least I don't.
we would task policy and audit both with that sort of responsibility? Since audit.
It's more of an audit,
Yeah,
to tell you the
okay.
truth. Policy needs to create the policy, but
Right,
it's
okay.
really for the audit
Okay.
committee to make sure we're doing with the policies.
All right, well, so we'll just stay on that. All of us together, okay. Great. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? It's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of discussing collective bargaining negotiations with our teacher union?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? It's unanimous, we're moving into executive session.